And we'll start by the basics of rotation with Alt left click, and we'll pan around using Alt middle click, and we'll zoom in, zoom out with Alt right click, or I'll wheel in and wheel out, as you can see in the bottom left hand corner. Now we'll just throw in some polys. So this is a polysphere. Comes in on the axis at 0, 0, 0. What we'll do now is just translate that. Snapping to the grid with holding the X key down, and we'll be rotating using the rotate manipulator and scale using the scale manipulator. Should be fairly familiar with these by now, but just in case you don't remember, W is translate, E is rotate, and R is scale. Just flick through them, find the one that you need. So we, go around the grid again, just hitting the X just to snap to grid. That's the one of the good uses of the free form translate tool. Another one is snapping to vertex. So we'll create a big planar plane with a few polys with it, and we'll throw on some wireframe on shaded, and we'll get rid of that grid so it's in the way. And you can see just by hitting V, we're snapping to vertex. So the pivot will snap to wherever there is a vertex. And this is kind of handy if you've got two objects which are quite far away from each other and you kind of want to get them to snap together quickly. Finally, we've got snap to curve. So we've just drawn a curve, NURBS curve there, and this is sometimes a bit tricky to get right, but if you persist, you'll get there. It's just holding C down and then clicking on the curve, and you'll notice that it follows that curve quite astutely. We'll put the grid back on, and next, and we'll put that in the center, 0, 0, 0, and we'll start to scale. Now, just a note, as mentioned in class, by selecting X, Y, and Z, you can scale them uniformly with numbers, which is always handy. And now we're just translating on each specific axis, just to remind you that it's generally best practice to restrict the movement, unless you've got a 4 view here, in which case you can go for it, but it's still very difficult to align anything like that. Just some notes on the restriction of movement here. With the rotate, again, it's probably best to rotate around using specific manipulators, but I find it even better just to type in the layer editor there, sorry, the channel box editor, generally because I only use 90 and 45s unless I want something a little bit more nuanced. Scale, you can see here, you can make things fatter, thinner, and flatter if you need to. Always handy, but again, best practice is just to scale them up in the XYZ, selecting all of them and just typing in numerical value. A nice round number is always helpful. Now we'll change the pivot point, so hitting D, so getting it from the center and moving it to the top there, and holding down V so it snaps to vertice. And now you'll notice that we can rotate that round that pivot point. And as I was saying before, just having standardized numbers just in increments of 45 or 90 tends to work the best. Now we've got it snapped to grid, but not where we want it. And you'll notice also, just as a side note, that it freezes the point that you moved the center pivot. So before now we're at -5 because that's where it was frozen to before. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to do some duplication. Now, duplication's a much more powerful tool than Control C, Control V is what you're used to. Um, I would dissuade you from using that technique in Maya. I'd much prefer duplicate or duplicate special. It's just a lot more powerful, and you can see just hitting Ctrl D copies and pastes in one single maneuver. Now we'll do a duplicate special, and you can see what you can do here just very, very quickly. So without further ado, here's duplicate special. So I'm just moving this and rotating this sphere just in a way which I find a little bit more interesting, away from the original duplication. And it kind of remembers this history. And if I hit Shift D, you'll notice that it creates a pattern or a path of these spheres. And now if I select them all, I can combine them together just by hitting Mesh, Combine, and I'll modify the pivot point just to go back to the original. Probably could just go back to the origin, and then you can see that you can manipulate this string of pearls from there. Just a point about the string of pearls is that I was trying to get to before was that the Shift D looks at what you've just duplicated using Ctrl D, and it records the data like the position, the rotation and scale and that whatnot, and it kind of remembers that thread of manipulations, and it tries just to continue that on. So I guess there are a few uses for it, but generally, as a general rule, I like just Control D as a duplicate. It's very fast, and in Unreal, it's kind of like doing instancing. So instancing is copying a piece of geometry or a mesh, but it doesn't add any geometry to the scene, so you can get away with using very low scenes. So low polys in scenes, I should say. Anyway, that's that for now. Have a look at it. There was a lot covered there, so everything from manipulation to duplication and navigation of the scene. Watch it again and maybe take some notes of anything that you missed out on. I'll have a list of shortcuts per tutorial, so that should help you out a little bit there. Enjoy!